Well, I'm Todd Hallinan, and I'm sitting here with Dan Foley. He's the owner of Foley Health and Fitness. Dan, you're a business owner, an entrepreneur,
Yep.
author,
Yeah.
husband,
Yeah.
father.
Yeah, the list is getting bigger.
Any other titles that we can add to your resume there?
I'm working on music. I don't have anything yet, but,
Okay.
but I don't have anything yet. But
All right.
Yep.
Well, great.
Yep.
Well, today we're here discussing with Dan his book, and the book is 7 Dates with Jesus. Now, Dan, so what is the story behind this book?
So for me, really, it was, I would say, kind of the starting place. I look back several years ago, and I just remember walking around with my wife, just walking around the neighborhood, and at the time, I just remember telling her, there's got to be a better way.
Right.
There's got to be a better way to live, because I'm working all the time, I'm stressed, things are not breaking through the way I want to, my life is just unbalanced,
Yeah.
and between work and family, it's like, how do you juggle it all? And I remember one day coming across one of my business partners. He had a book on his desk called The Richest Man That Ever Lived, and it had a challenge in there, and it said, it was about King Solomon, the richest man that ever lived, and he said, if you'll read one chapter from the book of Proverbs every single day for 5 years,
right,
it'll change your life. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to get started, and started reading one proverb a day. And I'll be honest, at the time I had my first young daughter, and just try to get a little bit of peace and quiet. Sometimes I had to go in the bathroom to go read my proverb. My wife will give me a hard time about that.
I've been there, brother.
But just to get away for a second, to be able to read it and to digest it in any way. But it took me about 11 months to really get where I was enjoying reading the proverb. At first, I was just kind of forcing myself and disciplining myself to do it just because of the challenge. But eventually, something happened at about the 11-month mark. I remember we were out in California visiting my parents, and I just remember it was around Thanksgiving time, and I remember waking up and I was excited to go see what was in the proverb that day. And what had happened was, I think, is I would read something in there, and I was like, that is definitely not the way I think in a completely different way, bless your enemies and, give and it shall be given unto you.
Yeah.
And that was not my way of thinking at the time. And I began through that process of reading the Proverbs, started to connect with God a little bit. And then I came across a guy who we've talked about him before, 113-year-old guy.
Right.
Said he'd never been sick a day in his life, and that all of his secrets were in the Bible. And then I came across another lady who was 106, and people were flying to her from all over the world, and she was healing them with nutrition and all kinds of stuff like that. And she had been on her deathbed in her 30s and healed herself with nutrition, and now people were flying all over to come see her. And she said the same thing, hey, all my secrets are in the Bible.
Wow.
I'm like, all right, I'm reading my one proverb, maybe I need to do a little bit more. And so I just started at the front like a book. And we've talked about this too.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for spiritual stuff at that time. I was looking for what were their health secrets, like how did they eat, what was the secrets that they were getting in the Bible.
Right.
And so I just started in the front, and I came across these 7 feasts of Israel, Passover, Pentecost, Feast of Tabernacles, these different feasts.
Yeah.
And I just remember at the time, through the process of the Proverbs for about a year at that point, I'd started to connect with God, started to pray a little bit. I would say I had no spiritual life. Like a lot of us at that point in my life leading up to that, I had no spiritual connection with God. And I would say one of the things I teach now is one of the ways that you have to balance your life is you have to balance the spiritual and the practical aspects of the life. Otherwise you're out of balance.
Right.
And so I came across those 7 feasts, and I just remember praying, God, I don't know anything about these feasts. They're in the Old Testament. What's the deal with the Old and the New Testament? I didn't know what was what.
Right.
And I just remember praying, like, hey, if these feasts are important, would you just show me? Or if they're relevant in any way, just would you show me? And so the next feast coming up was Rosh Hashanah, and which is in the fall. And I just started to Google. I don't know what else to do. I just started to Google Rosh Hashanah, what they do, and I started finding they have a tradition where it's like their January 1st. We're close to New Year as we're filming this. It's like their January 1, so like a fresh start. And they eat apples with honey on that day to symbolize, a sweet New Year the next year. And so, I was like, we could do that. That'd be fun. I don't know what else to do, but we could do that. And so I'm. Next day, so the feasts all start in the evening. I made a note. I needed to pick up some honey. We didn't have any honey. We had apples, but we didn't have any honey. So I said, all right, I need to pick up some honey. Well, when I got to the gym that next day, my very first client walks in with this great big jar of honey. And I think, like we've talked about this before too, that's the only time I think I've ever gotten a jar of honey as a gift at the gym. I was like, all right, I think God's trying to show me something here. And so I get the jar of honey. We do the apples with honey that night. And as I started Googling a little bit more, I found out, that's where you can find everything on Google, right? So I started Googling a little bit more and found that they have this period, Rosh Hashanah starts a 10-day period called the 10 Days of Awe. And it's the 10th day is the next feast, which is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And that's a day where they do a complete total fast. Well, in my research, I started seeing that that's the day they consider to be the most holy day of the year in the Jewish culture, because they say that's the day that God decides how your next year is going to be. So it's like kind of a big deal. And it just hit me all of a sudden. Sometimes God, you just get a flash of inspiration, and it's, wait a minute, Daniel in the Old Testament, Daniel did the first Daniel fast he did was for 10 days, and there's this 10-day period. So I started to do a Daniel fast during that 10-day period. The last day I did a total fast, and I started to go through some steps. They call those days the 10 days of awe. You want to get everything righted with people and with God. So repentance, making phone calls. So I made a couple phone calls that I didn't really want to make. Not easy phone calls to make, and just reconciling with people. I did this Daniel fast, and on the 10th day, the Day of Atonement, I didn't know what to expect other than to be hungry. You're supposed to fast, and no food, no water. Well, it didn't take long. About 9 o'clock that morning, all of a sudden I start getting all this insight and revelation that 7 times 7 is a complete cycle. 7 times 7 is a complete cycle. Referring back, I had just been reading through the Old Testament, and the cycle of 7 times 7 years, and then the 50th year was the Jubilee. That completed the cycle, which then started over again. So I'm starting to get all this revelation on the number 7. I'm starting to write stuff down. And as this is happening, like rainbows are all over the floor. I'm playing on the floor with my daughter, and there's rainbows like all over the floor. And my daughter, who's I think maybe 2 or 3 at the time, is like, look, there's a rainbow. Look, there's a rainbow. Look, there's another one. And they're all around us on the floor. And to some people that might not mean too much, but through my years just in the health and fitness stuff, I had studied Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine quite a bit, and they talk a lot about color. So this lady that was a 106-year-old lady that said all of her secrets from the Bible, she said the next wave of medicine is going to be color therapy. And so I knew a little bit about color. So we've been teaching at the gym, like blueberries are good for your kidneys and your bladder, and green stuff is good for your liver. And so I knew a lot about the different colors. There's also 7 colors in the rainbow. So there's some connections there. And so I'm all day just thinking about this 7 times 7 rainbows. I don't know what to do with it at that point, but I know God is, he's showed me these feasts are relevant, and now he's showing up and trying to show me something. I don't know what just yet. 2 days later, my second daughter Kira is born. We get to the hospital, and from the time we got there, I remember checking my phone because I had to call the gym because we didn't know when the baby was coming, so I had to call him and say, hey, we're at the hospital. And I remember looking down, it was 8 o'clock. 7 hours later, almost to the minute, it was 1 minute short maybe, exactly at 3 o'clock pretty much, she's born. Was it 3 o'clock? Is that 3? Yeah. 7 hours. She's born 7 hours almost to the minute, and it was broken into some very precise time intervals. And there was a period of just we walked the halls for a while, a period of some contractions and getting the epidural in and all this type of stuff, and then the last hour was as one of kind of pushing and getting ready to birth the baby. The Bible talks a lot about this process of being born again and delivered. So he began to show me some patterns, like what is the process that we go through to be born again? What is the process God has for us if we're going to step into what he's called us to do? You look at the pattern in the Old Testament of the Israelites coming out of the wilderness and into the Promised Land. How do we cross over into that? And that's kind of the patterns that he started to show me. But he wasn't done yet. There was more, so I had my daughter. We're in the hospital for a couple days. I'm trying to make sense of this 7 times 7, this pattern that I'm seeing, all this type of stuff. The next feast, so 3 feasts in a row. So you had the first one with the honey, next one with the rainbows, and the 7 times 7. Next feast was about a week later or so. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I kind of just keep hearing on the inside, you need to check the day you were baptized. Go check the day you're baptized. And so I asked my wife, I said, do you know where those certificates are from where we got baptized? She said, you mean this one? And I'm like, why? That's weird. Like, why do you have that in your hand right now? And she goes, well, we got baptized really close to when our first daughter Anya was born, and we just had a new baby, and she had the baby books out and was reminiscing, and the certificate happened to be in there, and she happened to be holding it at the time, which was a God moment.
Absolutely.
And so I grabbed the certificate, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, what am I looking for? And God had been showing me this process. The Israelites were in the wilderness 40 years. They cross over, they go into the promised land.
Right.
Well, when Jesus, it says that when they crossed the Red Sea, it was like their baptism. You probably know more about it than I do, but like their baptism, they cross over into the wilderness 40 years. Then there's a process for crossing over the Jordan into the promised land. Right. And so there's that pattern there. When you look at Jesus' life, he got baptized, and then he goes into the wilderness right away.
That's right.
40 days. Yeah. So the same thing, 40 days, 40 years. And then it says he comes out in the power. When he comes back out after the 3 temptations, he comes back out in the power of the Spirit. And so you see, I'm like, wait a minute, there's a pattern emerging here. Yeah. So I'm looking at this baptism certificate, and I'm like, what am I looking for? So I look at the date. That was September 25th, 2013. And I start counting back. I look back. We were baptized on May 25th, 2010. Okay, so I started looking, as I was doing the math. Wait a minute, that's exactly 40 months to the day. Wow. I'm like, wow. Wait a minute. Yeah. So 40 months a day. So 40 years, 40 days, 40 months. It's like, wait a minute. All right, we're coming out of the wilderness. And that time, over those last, what was that, 3.5 years, 40 months, it had been not the greatest. I feel like we were stuck in that cycle. It's like we were trying to do all this stuff, and nothing's really breaking through. Right. And just kind of in the cycle. Sure. There, just over and over. And I get the message like, hey, we're coming out. We're going into the promised land. Well, what I did not realize, and you probably could have told me this if I had known you at the time, is that when you come out of the wilderness, there was a process that they had to go through. God tells them, I'm not going to let you go straight in and just take it all. It's going to take you more than a year at least to go in and possess this thing. Yeah. And over the next year, in ongoing, I really started to get into this yearly cycle of the feast with God, and He began to use these feasts to teach me more and more about what Jesus has done for us, how to step into what we're called to do, how to walk it out, all these types of things. And so, kind of in the book, each of the feasts gives you a kind of a detailed, we talked about before, a different perspective of Jesus, showing a different angle of something that He's done for you. We've talked, one of the things is truth. Truth, when you see multiple angles, that's when you find the truth. You see the whole perspective of what's really going on. Right. And so each of these feasts gives you a different angle of something that Jesus has done for you. So you get a better picture of the whole, and you really understand what's going on. So that's what the book is about, is using these. We teach that pattern, and then we talk about, as you come out, how do you come out of the wilderness, first of all? What's the process for that? And then when you do begin to cross over, there's going to be a process that you got to go through to really step into what you're called to do. And the steps that you need are hidden in those feasts. So that's the relevance of the feast. But
and let's talk a little bit about that, the insights into the hidden things in the feasts, in the 7 feasts that you talk about in the book. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so that was one of my the things I struggle with, as I'm going through this process of learning about these feasts. New Testament, Old Testament. Right. Grace, law, what's what? Right. How do you know what? So here's what I've learned, is these feasts, number one, anything God does, He does it on a pattern. God has patterns that He uses. He told Moses, make the temple according to the pattern that I showed you. He gave David a pattern for the next temple. Right. So God has patterns that He uses. And so when you look at these feasts, one of the first things is you start to pick up on God's pattern. Yeah. You begin to see, like, hey, this is how He does, this is the order. There's a sequential kind of order of steps of how He does things. Right. And you begin to see that pattern kind of playing out. But also, I like to say, I think it's in Zechariah or something like that. It talks about, in the millennium, we'll still be celebrating Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles as well. And so what I've learned, I would say, is that these feasts are like the kingdom of heaven's holidays. So just like, we have 4th of July in the United States, and you got Thanksgiving and Christmas and things like that. Yeah. Like, these are God's This is his times of celebration. This is his calendar.
Right.
We have a world calendar and you have God's calendar, and this is his time of celebration. And so each of the feasts serve as kind of markers for changing seasons as well. The Bible talks about the moon will be, for signs and for seasons.
Right.
So it's for changing seasons. And, one of the things we talk about in the book is the yearly cycle, about how as you move from one feast to the next, you're kind of moving into a different season. So there's times to plant, there's times to cultivate, there's times to harvest, there's times to be focusing on different things. But, you think about the holidays, we're getting ready for holiday season here.
Right.
I mean, you typically, if I had to guess, you want to spend time with your kids.
Sure.
Absolutely. Around the holidays.
Yeah.
Well, I think God is no different.
That's true.
These are the holidays that He's set up. He said these are the days that are important to me.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing because I think I could be completely wrong, but I think what I can gather is in the Old Testament we see Him, it was required.
Right.
He says, I'm gonna you need to show up on these days, and nobody wanted to do it. Okay.
Right.
Well, if you ever been in a business where you had regular meetings, when the meetings are required, usually nobody wants to go.
Right.
It's usually the way it goes. But I feel like it's God has set it up in a way and saying, you know what? I'm available. I'm going to be here on this day at this time. If you want to show up, I'll be there.
Right. Yeah.
Is part of what I feel like He's done,
right.
And saying, this is the way that I like to do it. If you want to show up and be on my rhythm with me, so these feasts teach you how to get into a better rhythm with God too.
A better rhythm with God.
Yeah, which is huge for your understanding, your knowledge, your timing, of things is a big deal.
Let me ask you about that timing, because in the book you talk about identifying when you're coming out of the wilderness into your promised land.
Yeah.
What are some things that maybe people can apply in their life to see that transition or to identify that transition?
How do you come out?
Yeah, or that they are coming out, or that they're still in the wilderness.
Yeah.
You talk about in the wilderness, God provided just enough for the Israelites to survive, and I think people feel that in their life. They're just getting by. You hear that a lot. I'm just getting by. I'm paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
How can people identify that they're in the wilderness, and then how can the book show them that pattern to help them get out of the wilderness into their promised land?
Yeah. So the first thing is, you look back. What does it take to get out of the wilderness? Is the first question. So I think here's what I think. I could be way off. Is that the pattern says, you get born again, you get baptized, like you go into the wilderness.
Right.
That's where you go.
Right.
How do you get out? You look in the pattern. In the Old Testament with the Israelites, only two out of out of like a million got to go in.
Yeah.
Why? Unbelief.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I found is this. I think what initiated the process for me to come out was a couple things. Number one, God shows them a glimpse of the promised land. They send spies into the promised land, gives them a glimpse.
Right.
They come back and with a report, it really is the promised land, but we can't take it because it's too big for us. There's giants in the land. We're not able to do it.
Right.
Okay. Joshua and Caleb have a different mindset, different spirit, I think the Bible says. And they come back and say, it is the promised land. God is with us. Let's go take this thing. Well, they're the only two that get to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think two things happen. God is going to show you a glimpse of where He wants to take you at some point when you're in the wilderness. And how you respond, I think, is the biggest factor.
Right.
Of whether or not you go in or not.
How you respond, just like Caleb and Joshua did.
How you respond. So He began to show me towards the end of that time, I would say, a glimpse of some bigger things from my life, with the health and fitness business. It's grown since then. He didn't show me the whole thing, but He showed me a bigger glimpse than I had seen ever before.
Right.
And I responded with like, okay, let's do this. If you're going to help me, let's go.
That's right. And I think, God, He won't show you the whole picture at one time, because I think if He showed you the whole picture, you would say, whoa.
Yeah. If He'd have showed me the whole thing that I know, was it 5 years out now? I would have freaked out.
Right. Right. He gives you the bite-sized pieces.
Be like, there's no way. He showed me just enough to say that it was going to take some faith.
Yes.
To say, it looks big, But I said, okay.
Right.
I was kind of like, I don't have like an actual like audible voice or anything like that, but I just began to get a glimpse of where this could go, and kind of responded with okay. And then I think after that, they crossed the Jordan River, and it talks about when they crossed the Red Sea, the waters were already parted, and then they walked through. But to cross the Jordan River, you got to take a step when the water's still moving. And so it's this idea of just art. I think that process of the Daniel fast, and to be honest, I think the Daniel fast wasn't as important as I took the steps to forgive and to reconcile some relationships, which is we're commanded to do biblically. God says, I'm not gonna. You can pray to me, but if you're not willing to do this, then it doesn't work quite as well.
That's right.
I don't. You probably know better than I do. But so I think those two. I think you're gonna get a glimpse, and you're gonna how you respond is huge, and then you got to take the first step. You just got to take a step, and He'll meet you.
That's right.
When you take it. The waters will part, you go through, and then you're going to take more steps, once you get on the other side too. But I think the other thing with the wilderness is people have this association with the wilderness. When we say wilderness, people think of a bad thing. Okay. What He showed me, and we talk about it in the book, is that so this process of getting born again. So you open your heart to allow Jesus in, and it says that we are born again through a seed. Okay. And it takes, you go through this period of 40. Well, when a woman gets pregnant, the seed is planted in her, and she's pregnant for 40 weeks.
Right.
Same exact process. And then the baby is birthed into the land, into the land of giants, because everybody's bigger. But
and there's that number 40 showing.
So there's a number 40. So he showed me that, where is the safest place for the baby while the baby is growing and developing? It's in the womb.
Right. Okay,
so the wilderness is like the womb. During the wilderness time, the mom does everything for the baby. Okay, it's just like manna. The manna was fed to him every single day.
That's right.
The mom is providing all the oxygen, all the nutrients, all the hydration, all of the food, all of the everything.
Right.
But it's just enough.
Just enough.
It's just enough. And so when you're in the wilderness, it feels like you're kind of like closed in, like you're trying to do this and trying to do this and trying to do this and trying to do this, but nothing's getting you out, type of thing. And it's just enough. You're never completely without, but you don't know where it's always going to be coming from.
Right.
And so it's this place where you are learning to develop trust, in God too. And so it's actually, if God is good and He only gives good gifts, the wilderness is actually a gift. It's actually the safest place for you, because if He sent you in before you were ready, the giants would crush you.
They would crush you.
If you're not going to go in trust and in faith and have some courage, when you get over there, it's not going to work. So it's actually the best place for you, being in this wilderness time. Right. So. Am I answering your question?
Yeah. And it sounds like that number 40 is like a pattern for change, really.
I think, so what's happening, in a baby, everything is being formed, everything is being developed. The change is happening to go from this tiny seed to, something that can survive outside of the womb.
Right.
Is the goal.
Yeah.
And in the book later on, there's some cool things that happen, when a baby is born. We talk about there's some cool things that happen, like, when the baby's born and the umbilical cord is cut, okay, the baby has, the baby's heart, there's two sides on the heart, right?
Yeah.
When the baby's in the womb, there's a partition or a wall that seals off and makes it be two sides. Well, when the baby's in the womb, there's not two sides. That partition is not there. Okay, so because the baby doesn't. So what happens is normally when we breathe in air. It gets pumped to the heart, and the air comes up into the lungs and then goes around back to the other side to get pumped out to get oxygen to the body.
Absolutely.
Well, the baby's getting the oxygen from the mother,
right?
So it doesn't need to go through the lungs.
Gotcha.
It's already in the blood.
Right.
Okay, so it just goes straight across the heart.
Wow.
Okay. Well, interesting thing happens when the cord is cut. Okay. The baby takes its first breath. The baby's heart is forever changed. This partition wall closes off, and now the air has to go into the blood has to go into the lungs to get oxygen for the first time. So you talk about the Holy Spirit, being related to air and oxygen and a rushing wind and these types of things. It's this idea of when you are born again, you get a new heart.
Right. That's right.
Your heart, your heart is made new.
That's right.
And literally, we see that in the baby's birth. So the cord is cut. So when the Israelites cross over into the Promised Land, the cord is cut. The manna doesn't show up anymore. It says that when they crossed over, they had to go get their own food now.
That's right. That is so cool. That is so cool. Well, I think there's all kinds of nuggets like that in this book. And one thing, just the name of it, 7 Dates with Jesus. I was looking at that, and I love it how when you have a title and it can mean two things. And the first thing that I gleaned from that was 7 Dates with Jesus. If you replace the word dates with encounters, 7 encounters with Jesus through the 7 feasts, because they're patterned, just like you said, they're patterned. And then 7 dates, as in like a date being a moed, an appointed time. Those feasts are set aside as appointed times. And in the book, you show us, through the pattern of the 7 feasts, how it can apply for us in this day and time.
Well, one of my, like I said, I originally started reading my Bible because I was looking for practical stuff, like nutrition and fitness, to help people. And I needed the spiritual. Like I said, my life was out of balance. I needed the spiritual stuff, but I wanted practical. Like, if I'm going to learn something spiritual, I want to know how to apply it. Like, what does that mean for me? Like, how do I actually use that, in my life? What is, that's a great truth, but what does that mean I need to do different now? And so I think some of this just being open to change, is a big deal. But I think, you go through this process with God, where you have these appointed times with Him, and He changes you along the way.
That's right. So, if you allow Him to, for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you can tell us about the book that people would need to know?
I think one of the things there is I think the big thing is learning. One of the biggest things is you see different angles of Jesus, but you're also learning God's pattern. Is I think, and so we're supposed to imitate. Like children, we're supposed to imitate our Father. We're supposed to imitate God, and the more we can understand His pattern, the more we can put that into our own lives. That's the pattern. That's the blueprint. That's the pattern for building your life off of, and it's hidden in there.
Right.
But one of the things that you see this pattern is you go through this process of a lot of it's underground, under the surface at first, of really cultivating faith and cultivating belief. Not only in God, that He wants to help you, but that you can do it, like, with His help.
Yes.
And so under the surface, it's building that and then connecting with Him through the Holy Spirit to get the plan for you. So you got this four parts that are hidden in this first 4 feasts. Of really, it's all about getting your trust and your faith and your confidence that God wants to help you and He can do it through you, type of thing. Getting that built up, because a lot of times, let's be honest, we doubt. We look at that Promised Land and we're like, I don't know if I can do that.
Those giants look pretty big.
They look pretty big. And so it's developing that in ourselves through connecting with Him. I mean, I think it only comes through that. But, you're building your relationship with Him, and that you know how to connect and get into a rhythm with Him, and you're building your faith and trust in what He can do through you. And sometimes, we talk about one of the feasts, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, is understanding that He sent Jesus to die for you so that He could connect with you and help you. Right. And having that belief that, like, even when I've sinned and messed up, like, He still wants to help me.
That's right.
He still wants to guide me. He still wants to help me. Jesus paid for all that.
He did.
To have that connection with Him. The Old Testament way was if you didn't do right, like, you lost your connection. You're blessed or cursed based on your works. And He made a better way through Jesus of saying, even when you mess up, I'm gonna, not that you want to mess up, but when you connect with Him, you want to do right by Him. But He's made provision for us to stay connected to Him. And so it's, you're going to get connected. I think that's one of the biggest things for me is just I was out of balance. I had no connection with God. I was chasing after all of the practical areas of life, like health and business and finances and family, and I had no vertical connection with God. Was one of the big issues. So hopefully this will help people to get better connected with Him and find their, for me, that process was getting connected with Him, and it allowed me to find my purpose. And have just a much greater sense of purpose and direction, and to know, like, hey, this is my plan for you.
Yes.
That's a big deal to know, what is God's plan for my life, and to have the faith and belief that He can make it happen through you.
Yeah, I believe that's one of the biggest questions that people have, even people with faith. What is God's purpose for me? What is my purpose on this earth?
Yeah, and I would say it was through both the timing of the feasts and the insights hidden in those feasts that I began to discover that purpose that He had for me. Right. You've seen it. We have the picture of this abundant life blueprint, right. And helping people to build that blueprint, which is, there's a timing to how you build that. There's the process of the phases of like wilderness and things like that, but then there's also the yearly cycle timing of how this thing kind of unfolds as you go too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, how can people find out more about 7 Dates with Jesus?
Well, we've got 2 options. So they can buy it on Amazon, and they can go on there and buy it on Amazon. It's got Kindle or paperback. Or if they go to my website, it's just danielfoley.net. Actually, give them a free copy. They just have to pay for the shipping, $7 for the shipping, and they can get a free copy of the book shipped out to them through my website if they want to do it that way. But they can purchase it either way, either Amazon, or they can go to danielfoley.net and find it there.
That's great. So danielfoley.net. 7 Dates with Jesus, crossing over into abundant life. Or you can go to Amazon and get it as well. Well, Dan, this has been great. I believe that this could be a benefit to a lot of people, and especially people that want to, maybe seeking their purpose in life and finding out the patterns with the 7 feasts and the hidden truths in those feasts. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff in those feasts.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. I heard one guy say one time something along the lines, if you will, I think it was a Hebrew or Jewish somebody that said this, but if you will study, there's a great blessing hidden in studying the feasts. Because you will learn about God and His ways and His patterns and these types of things, and just how He operates. He's your dad.
That's right.
You want to know how your dad does things. Like,
that's exactly right.
There's a whole sequence of things of steps of how He does things. So.
Well, that's great. Well, everybody, get the book and you'll find out more, and just stay tuned, and we'll talk to Dan some more later.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.